Li- Live. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to Anonymous Addiction Deprogramming Podcast with Bobby C. I'll be your host today, Bobby C. And don't forget to subscribe, ladies and gentlemen, and check us out on Anonymous Addiction, My Truth About AA, as Bobby C sees it, on Facebook. It's a private group. No one can, this is a private group on Facebook. And this is how I met this lady over here, Sue. Wonderful. I've been meaning to talk with her for probably 6 months, and it happened. It's more or less, it just came to fruition, and it happened. And I love it because her story is what I've been like trying to relay on a lot of podcasts. I'm working with a mental health rehab over there in South Africa right now, and they're incorporating all kinds of new different things, and luckily I'm part of that. And Sue is helping me because she's I'm still learning. I'm like a student and a teacher. I'm always open, and I always want to learn things. So when I talk to Sue, she just unfolds her whole story, and we're going to go from one part, which is probably only about 3 years ago, and then we're going to take you back into her life and then bring you today, what it's all about today. We want to just make sure we're not providing any professional advice here. That's not what we're doing. So don't even try to go there with it. We're not, and we're expressing our life experiences, about what we have discovered through many years of researching on our own. And Sue can tell you all about that, and gathering information and knowledge, So we're not telling you what to do. We're just giving you some practical experience that we went through. And if it could help you possibly, that's great. Sue, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bobby. It's great to be here.
Love it, love it, love it. You know what? Let's get into like what prompted you. Let's just say a year before you went into a rehab, or a couple of years before you went into a rehab. Let's start there. And what age were you, and what happened?
So, like I have talked to you about 2018, I started having issues with what I felt like I was self-medicating my anxiety, and had gotten to a point where it had become literally debilitating. I couldn't move. And, before that, I had always been a social drinker. So I knew that having a drink or two seemed to calm me. More in the physical sense than anything else, but it's still nonetheless, it calmed me. So thought to myself, well, if I take a drink right now, I'll be able to function. And much like many other people's stories go with abusing alcohol rather than using it as a social elixir, it never works with just one drink. Eventually you're finding yourself having to take another drink even quicker than you had to before. And it just got to a point where, I became a very heavy binge drinker. I wasn't a daily drinker. I was a binge drinker. And my binges just got worse and worse as 2008, 2020, 2021, I was going for longer stretches. And right before I went into detox, I had been drinking for 4 days straight.
Now, let me ask you a question. Let me stop you right there. So would we agree on that the alcohol did supply did give you some emotionally and physical relief?
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely. But this is the way I put it. I feel like it really only affects the physical part of the body, but that physical part of the body, once that becomes, at least for me, this is my story, once that becomes relaxed, you know, with the anxiety, with the shaking and the hyperventilating and the pounding heart, once those bodily symptoms relax, it's just kind of, you know, that's what happens, at least with me, you know, it follows that my mind can relax. You know, I can think clearer, even though that doesn't make sense, because we all know that once you've had enough alcohol in your system, your judgment is impaired. But I don't mean it so much in that way, just more that the anxiety, because those bodily symptoms were sort of numbed at that point, you know, once I got enough alcohol in me, there was just a natural calming of my mind.
So
because
it did give you some relief, and it did ease. It did kind of ease. I think yesterday we talked about it was like easing. It eased the suffering, really, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have kept doing that to myself. I mean, I was harming myself with the amount of liquor I was taking in.
So go ahead from there. What happened, and how did you get into the rehab? And were you pushed into it in the beginning, and then eventually you made your own choice? How did you land up in detox?
So when I actually wound up in detox and a rehab, it was my own decision. But a year before that, I had family, I had friends that were really, really pushing for it. They felt like that was the only option I had. And, you know, I wound up putting it off in 2020 because at the beginning of COVID, everything was shut down. It was really scary. I actually showed up to the place, and I had an elevated temperature, and they wouldn't take me in. They said I had to wait 4 days. And in that 4 days, I was like, no, I'm not going away. I'm not being shipped away from my family, you know, in the midst of a pandemic that we know nothing about. So then fast forward a year later, there was a year's worth of people being like, you know, you got to do this or you'll die, which, I mean, we can get into that. That's not, there's plenty of research out there that shows that when people go into these 12-step rehabs, they typically come out and binge even harder because of all the crap that they put in your head, you know, by brainwashing you into thinking that you're diseased forever. But kind of becomes a defeatist attitude. But yeah, I wound up giving in because at that point, my husband was going to leave me, and I did not want that. I didn't want to have a broken home. You know, I loved him. I wouldn't be able to function without my family. You know, I have a daughter. That's everything to me. So again, I had a 4-day stretch of drinking, and I wound up having a friend drive me down to the Detox, several miles away from my family, that was heart-wrenching to leave my daughter and to leave my husband and not know where our marriage was heading. So yeah, that's how I found myself going into detail.
So talk about a little bit about what they did, because we're gonna look, the audience, please stay tuned, because we're going to go back in Sue's go back in time when she was 7, 12, 14, 13, 18. So we're going to get into that if we have enough time. But the thing is that, so Sue goes into a detox, and they take her off some medications, right?
Yeah.
So was that a healthy thing that you kind of felt or seen or felt or acknowledged?
Oh, no, definitely not. But I kind of felt like I was at their mercy. So like you said, we'll get into it, but I've always battled anxiety, and one of the main classes of drugs that they give people for anxiety is benzodiazepines. And I was on one of those called Klonopin. And I never abused that. And in fact, I wouldn't even take it when I was drinking. I wouldn't take it because it was dangerous. Never, ever, ever abused Klonopin. I took it as prescribed. But the thing is, I took it as prescribed for almost 10 years, every single day. And just like alcohol, benzodiazepines are the only other toxin that you can die from in withdrawal. And they, in their infinite wisdom down at the Detox, tapered me in 5 days.
Yeah. Let me hold you right there. Okay, so everyone listening, the listeners out here, that's why we're talking about mental health. We're leading into this mental health, mental illness. We're leading into, because of Sue's story, we're leading into becoming eventually your own advocate. Eventually, not in the beginning, because we're separating mental health, mental illness, and we could talk a little bit about that. Sue and I know the difference. So go ahead, Sue. So they bring you in the Detox, they withdraw you in, I would say improperly, the detox you, right? And then they put you in the rehab for how many days?
It was a 30-day rehab. And unfortunately, because they tapered me so quickly, again, for the years that I was on that should have been weeks, if not months, of a very slow, what they call titration off of Klonopin, and I was off of it in 5 days. I went through horrendous withdrawal, and the withdrawal was not from the alcohol. The alcohol was out of my system. It was the withdrawal from the benzos. I couldn't sleep for my first couple of weeks. I wanted to leave the first day I was there because, again, rehabs, and almost all of them they'll tell you that we don't just focus on 12-step, they all focus on 12-step. And they all have that ideology that once an addict, always an addict, and an addict is going to be an addict of anything. So, that's why they don't let you have playing cards, because if you're away from your drug of choice, well, you're going to become a gambler. So they take you off a valid medication. I didn't go there because I was abusing benzos. I went there because I was abusing alcohol. But
you know what? Let's just right there. That's okay. So this is what I'm getting, Sue, and correct me if I'm wrong. You go into a rehab, they take you off a prescription that you're not abusing. That's maintaining your symptoms from anxiety, and we'll get into the PTSD and all that other stuff. They bring you in there, and did they label you an alcoholic? Did they say you're alcoholic?
Oh yeah, that's of course, absolutely.
So we're going to talk about misdiagnoses. Okay, so what I get, because I talked to Sue and I chatted with her about, and this is what I'm all about. There's so much misdiagnosis going on in this world that is pathetic. So Sue goes into a rehab. They're labeling her alcoholic, and they're misdiagnosing her. They're missing the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. They're focusing on a behavior. Like I said to you yesterday, there's people that cut themselves, that self-mutilate. That's not their disease. That's what is so intriguing about how did they decide that abusing alcohol, which is you're just harming yourself in another way, how did they decide, this one is the disease, this is the disease? And then you get a lot of people that they don't come out of rehab with a solution. They come out with another disease that they're told they're never going to be cured from, and is only going to get stronger. Even if they choose total abstinence, it's only going to get stronger.
Right. So they put you in rehab. They're indoctrinating the 12-step ideology, the disease concept, and they're saying the only way to go is Alcoholics Anonymous because you have this disease. They're missing the point. They're not even like, I probably got more from you in an hour of your story. You would think that they would sit down and listen to a story, prior. No, go into rehab, go into detox, get out of detox, go do the 12-step disease model, and then where do they send you after that, Sue?
They didn't send me anywhere. And after that stint, I had to be done. But I'll tell you, they do a good job of brainwashing you, because I came home and, oh my God, I wish that I could take back what I said, but I was so brainwashed at that point. I came home and I'm telling everybody, they saved my life. They didn't save my life. I saved me. I pulled myself out of the trenches, but I didn't come home. I came home with basically Stockholm syndrome, where the person that's been captured empathizes and agrees with their captor. And I'm not trying to act like these people captured me. I went in there willingly, although I'll tell you, they do a good job of gaslighting you when you say you want to leave. They'll, if you go home, your husband's going to divorce you. And, we care about, you don't care about me. You just met me an hour ago. You care about the $12,000 you're going to get from me. That's what you care about.
Yeah, well, you know what? It actually worked. It was great that you went in there, because you found out. You found a lot of things out, because you're a free thinker. You're an open thinker. You're an independent person. So you found out, but you did go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Tell us about that. How'd you get there?
Well, I actually started going to AA on and off 2 years, well, maybe about a year and a half to 2 years prior to my stint at rehab. And that was after I had experienced my first blackout. So around the summer of 2019, I experienced my first ever real blackout. And it really shook me to my core, and I'm like, well, something's going on here. So maybe I do need to go to AA, because nobody offers anything else. Or they offer it like with rehab, they'll offer it, but it's like a side note.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than a side note. So, it was really, really pushed by everyone around me. And in society, you can't watch a movie or a show without someone that goes to AA.
Hollywood, just watched Lincoln Lawyer, Lincoln Lawyer. It was all about going into, 12, it looked like a 12-step modality where they went around a circle, held hands, and his sponsor was this girl that he picked up, and not sponsored, but a friend. I mean, the whole thing, it was Hollywood. Society is indoctrinated with the antiquated 87-year-old antiquated modality of this disease concept. What has been debunked anyhow? I mean, we know that. Sue and I know that, and that's what this podcast is all about, is deprogramming that type of stuff. But it goes deeper. It goes so deep into society, where they send people from courts. They send them, Hollywood indoctrinates them. The government does. Society does. Every doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, wherever they go to learn about their profession, they get educated on the disease concept and 12-step modality,
Yeah. I think that back in the day, it was kind of a dream come true for professionals, where they feel like, oh, we have something now that can take care of the drunks. We don't have to take care of them anymore.
Exactly.
They don't need to be a burden to us anymore.
Exactly.
We'll send them to this program, quote unquote.
Right.
And it never sat with me. It never sat with me. But there was this internal struggle of, well, I got everybody telling me that this is what you should do. And the things, there's so many things. And I would not waste, but I would use up too much of the time in this podcast talking about all the things that I disagree with. But
okay.
Okay.
Power. So let's go from there. Okay. You're out of you went to AA before. So you come out of rehab. You didn't go into Alcoholics Anonymous.
No, I didn't.
And you kind of joined. Let's go back now. Let's bring the audience back until your childhood, like 7, 8, 10, 15. What were some of the things going on with you back then? Because we're talking about mental health, mental illness, becoming a mental health advocate. So go back and tell the audience a little bit about the real deal, where it's coming from.
Okay, well, it first started at 7 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night, and Didn't realize it then, but I know now. I had my first ever panic attack. Um, and at that time, I didn't know what it was. My parents didn't know. I think they just kind of assumed, oh, I got spooked by something. Maybe I had a nightmare. Well, those episodes, this is the only thing I can really call them, because it's hard to look back and remember exactly what I was feeling at that young of an age. But those episodes, they didn't go away. And they just got worse and worse. And it's like my world got smaller and smaller as the phobias grew. It just, I didn't want to get on elevators, but it wasn't just a typical, oh yeah, I'm a little claustrophobic. I mean, it would ruin my day, and I would hyperventilate, and I'd feel sick to my stomach. And it just, at that point, probably around 10 years old, I think my family was realizing, because there were other people in our family that struggled with it, that I was developing anxiety. And
which in turn is, am I correct in saying, you could correct me if I'm not, anxiety is fear?
it is. It's definitely fear, but it's not. I have
it's
to
not
say,
that simplistic where we just say it's fear.
Well, but I want to say this as like a disclaimer, because too many people misunderstand it. They say, oh, you mean like paranoia? No. It is not the same as being paranoid. It isn't the same. It's not. I was not afraid there was someone in my TV, and I don't mean to, I should not giggle about that, because that's a real thing. That's a real thing that schizophrenics deal with. But I was not afraid that there was someone, in my radio or TV listening to me.
No.
It was just, it basically what it is that a panic attack is the same feelings that you feel. I always say, step in front of a train and jump off just in time to save yourself, and just feel what's going on inside your body, because that's a panic attack. It's adrenaline. It's a rush of adrenaline and cortisol that your body doesn't need, but it has to do something with it, right? So that's where you get the pounding heart and the shaking and the queasiness and the hyperventilating was the worst, because on top of just the hyperventilating itself, then you feel like you're not breathing. And then you're afraid you're going to pass out or you're going to die.
That's
So
some scary shit. And you've been dealing with this for years. So you go into counseling about age, what, 13, 14?
13 was the first time. And it would be the first of many times that I would go in and out of counseling.
Talk a little bit about the bullying, the little stuff not the little stuff, the trauma and the bullying and stuff like that. At what age did that start?
Oh, sure. So the bullying, at least as far as I can really recall it becoming a problem, was probably 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. Some of the most formative years, your preteens. And you don't recognize it at the time, because when you're a kid like that, you're just embarrassed. You don't want people to know. My mom always is like, oh my gosh, I wish that you had told me. And I said, Mom, I didn't want you to know. I was embarrassed. So it was like, I had a counselor explain this to me, and I was like, yes, that's it. They said, school became your battleground. It became a battleground. And that's why they're discovering that bullying, childhood bullying, it doesn't, the effects of it don't typically present. I mean, you do have kids that tragically, take their lives, but most of the time, the effects of it don't present until you're an adult, because you don't process it as a kid. You want to forget about it. You want to bury it, and once I got into later on in high school, I wasn't being bullied anymore. I was finding myself. I was finding my interests. I had a boyfriend, all these good things were happening. So you bury it. Okay, that happened. I'm not going to ever think about it again. Well, surprise, surprise, it rears its ugly head in ways that you don't even really understand until you take a step back and look at it. Where is, because So not to get, I'm trying to keep on track here. The way that affected my anxiety is over the years, my anxiety only got worse. And I would go into these episodes of a crisis, basically, where it, like I said at the very beginning, it became debilitating, physically debilitating, to the point I couldn't move. And that happened 3 or 4 times throughout my life. And it was that very last time in 2018 that it became so debilitating that I left my job. I couldn't take care of my daughter, who was still young enough that she needed my help. And that was when that light bulb went off. I need to do something, so I'm going to take a drink.
Now, during all these years, like, from 7, 15, 16, 18, blah, 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 you're going to therapy and you're getting some diagnoses, some like you mentioned OCD, you mentioned PTSD, anxiety, and these traumas that happened to you as childhood. And you're not you worked through this, and you came out of it. Let's just say you worked through it, okay? And you're not letting the trauma or the past hold you today. It's not bonding you today. It's not an addiction today. But so the trauma. Let's talk a little bit about the OCD. When were you diagnosed with different disorders?
So my first initial diagnosis was at 13, like I told you, when I first went to counseling, and they diagnosed me with OCD and simple phobia. And with OCD, I didn't have the compulsive behaviors, although drinking would become a compulsive behavior for me. But mine was more the obsessive part of it, the ruminating on things. I had a lot of health anxiety. I was scared, petrified of death. A lot of people are scared of death, but it consumed me to the point I couldn't enjoy life. And the thing is that then it eventually doesn't become about what you were even thinking about. Then the anxiety just takes over. I was probably 15 or 16 when I was diagnosed with having, full-blown panic attacks. And that was the first time that I tried taking what I had told you about, the Klonopin, but I actually only stayed on it for about a year or two. I want to say it might have been closer to a year and a half, because it was, I think, around the end of my junior year that my doctor put me on Klonopin. And I came off of it at some point when I was 18. So it was about a year and a half that I was on. But, I was a kid. I didn't want to be on medication. I didn't want to go to counseling. I wanted to be like everybody else, And again, at that point, nobody had ever uttered the words PTSD. And, I feel like this is a good time to mention that I was molested as a very young child. And I don't have real memories of it. There are certain things that I can look back and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. No wonder that bothered me, or that bothered me. That must have been little memories that I had. And I don't feel quite comfortable sharing all of those, but just know that there were certain things that would kind of come to my mind that didn't quite make sense, but they gave me this very kind of sick feeling, and my stomach would almost drop. And I found out it was actually through my sister that both of us had been molested by a neighbor. And I don't remember it, but it's not because I blocked anything out. I was just very young.
No, it was there. You knew something was there. You didn't know what it was, And that's what we're talking about when we talk about shadow work or inner child work or the wounded child or whatever. If this is subconscious, this is unconscious. This is like subconscious stuff that is affecting our lives, and we don't even know it's affecting it. So it's subconscious. It's not brought up to the conscious. It's subconscious, and we're doing things habitually and don't know why, but it's because of all this layering of this trauma that we accumulated, and we don't even know. We don't even know that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to say something to the audience. We only probably have about another 7 minutes on this podcast, but we're going to do a part 2. We have to do a part 2 with this because Sue's story, we're going to evolve and kind of wind it down in the next podcast, which we'll do tomorrow probably if Sue's available. But okay, continue. Let's stay with that. Let's say you're 18. You're on what is it? Klonopin? Klonopin. And you kind of went off it because you wanted to be normal. Of course, you want to become normal, and you're off of it for how long?
I didn't go back on any medication until I was 33. So I was off for a good chunk.
Okay. Let me ask you. So from 18 to 33, were you drinking heavy?
No.
Okay, here we go. See, this is the point that we're getting at. Misdiagnosis. You know, I did a podcast with to the employees where in the first two pages they talk about 3 suicides, and they don't mention anything about mental illness. 87 years ago, they just say it's you're addicted to alcohol. You're an alcoholic. You have alcoholism, the disease.
Right.
And that's what actually happened to you.
Yeah. Well, much later on in life, I definitely had the diagnosis of anxiety.
Yes. No, I'm not. I'm only talking about when you went into rehab, they diagnosed you with alcoholism and the disease, which was misdiagnosed. And they're doing that over and over and over again to people.
Oh, yeah. Once alcohol was in the picture, it's like everybody forgot that I was dealing with all this other stuff. It's really tragic because I think I've said this so many times. I think my story is very similar to a lot of other people's stories. And all of a sudden, nobody wants to listen to you anymore because, let's face it, we do some messed up stuff sometimes when we drink. So people tend to forget that why you started drinking in the first place, drinking heavily. But I definitely I was just your basic social drinker. I didn't even like getting drunk. I didn't even get drunk on my 21st birthday.
Right. So that's this whole thing, the second part we're going to get into, we're going to stop right now. We have like 4 minutes left and we're going to be shut down by Zoom, but we're stopping when Sue's 18. She stopped using her meds, and she's kind of from 20 years old to 33 years old. We're going to talk about that when we come back to part 2. Okay, we're going to get into that, and we're going to get into after that. And because we already talked about the detox and rehab, we're going to talk about what she does today, how she lives her life today. It's going to be very interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to Anonymous Addiction Deprogramming Podcast right here. Sue, say a little bit of closing remarks. We have, 3 minutes. You got like 3.5 minutes. So it's a little bit of closing remarks for this episode.
Wow. I'm not prepared for that. But I guess, in the second part, it'd be great to kind of bring in, some of my past with religion and how I, just like you said, how I deprogrammed from that, how I was able to get past thinking that I have a disease that's incurable. It's.
And we'll talk about the moderation that you do today, which is no problem. And we're going to talk about the freedom model too. We're going to give a little bit of pros and cons about the freedom model also on the next podcast, because that's what life's all about. We need to push back on a lot of different things. Not that we're knocking it. Or we're going to deprogram it in a little bit of ourselves, that we kind of discovered, and it's going to be a great podcast. So tell us a little bit more about what we want to talk about next podcast, Sue.
Well, like you had mentioned the freedom model. I think that there was a lot of great points that I took from that, but I think the thing that I took from that is I don't need to deny the realities of what alcohol did in order to say, no, I didn't have a disease. You can't go from one extreme to another. And I feel like out there, it seems like there's only extremes for people that have dealt with this. And we don't need that. We don't need extremes. Everybody is an individual, and they need to kind of figure out how to work out their own life on their own terms. It's, yeah, you got to weigh the pros and cons. Nothing is foolproof. Nothing.
No, check it all out. Get into it, dive into it, do your own research. But, we're all teachers and students, and the freedom model is going to teach us some things, and some things we're going to push back against it and tell our reality about it. That's how things evolve. Sue, we're going to catch you on the next podcast, but I want to make sure everybody stays tuned for My Rehab Cafe. Check it out on my Anonymous Addiction, My Truth About AA, as Bobby sees it, podcast on Facebook, because My Rehab Cafe is doing amazing things with mental health, and we're on the cutting edge of a lot of different things, because we're allowed to come together and talk different, have pushback, and we don't have to argue or fight. We could just listen to each other. So there's only 1 minute left. Sue, say goodbye.
Take care. Thank you so much, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay, tomorrow Sue is going to be available, hopefully, and we're going to do this podcast and finish it up tomorrow. We'll see everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.